The 80s canon of superhero films has the Christopher Reeve Superman films at or near the top of the rankings, apart from the one actually made by Canon Films. This fourth Superman film was a cheap, truncated effort that ended up turning Kal-El into the Man of Cheese. Superman 4: The Quest for Peace.
Effective immediately, I'm going to rid our planet of all nuclear weapons.
While Richard Lester's Superman 3 had done enough business to keep Alexander and Ilya Solkind's Superman franchise afloat, Supergirl and other Solkind projects had done quite poorly at the box office. The producing duo wanted out of the Superman business and sold the film rights to Canon Films for less money than it took to make the little-seen sequel to Raise the Titanic refinance the Titanic. Canon Films started off by making low-budget schlock. Well, it's apparent they never forgot where they came from. In the late 70s, they were bought out by cousins Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, with Canon Films and the Golan Globus name proving to be a seal of a certain level of quality for home video rentals. Lots of ninja films, Death Wish films, and even a big-budget action film with Sylvester Stallone, Cobra. When we reviewed Superman 3, we found it was just on the border of underwhelming and adequate, two states separated by the Fromage River. Superman 4 in 1987 was what happens when the Fromage River burst its banks, inundating both states with a mouldy, molten wave of dairy stank.
Oh no!
Christopher Reeve hadn't blown up majorly as an actor as a result of Superman and was reluctant to return to the role, but was lured back with a big check, which 80% of the time works 110% of the time. He was also offered approvals on this, that and the other, but stipulated a storyline about nuclear disarmament, which was literally a hot-button topic in the 1980s.
You shouldn't have gone to all that trouble.
Superman 4 sees the Daily Planet taken over by the ruthless tabloid magnate David Warfield,
The Daily Planet hasn't made any money in 3 years.
who agitates Perry White and installs his daughter Lacey Warfield as the Daily Planet's new publisher. She's got the hots for Clark, while Lois does her best to talk up all of Clark's worst points.
It's a date.
A date?
A date?
Well, it's just business, actually.
Like when Auntie Beryl testified as a character witness in court, except here Clark doesn't end up getting 10 years for jaywalking.
Clark is the oldest living Boy Scout, okay? He's trustworthy, he's helpful, he's loyal, he's obedient,
Lex Luthor is busted out of a chain gang by his nephew, Lenny Luthor, and immediately sets to work on a way to
destroy Superman!
Meanwhile, a kid writes to Superman asking him to rid the world of nukes, and Supes is conflicted. His way of dealing with this is, well, he quickly throws Lois off a balcony, rescues her to let her know he's Superman despite her mortal terror, takes her on a flight around the world, rehashing that same scene from the first movie, again dropping her because apparently he's also a dick these days, and after he's unloaded his problems, uses his amnesia kiss to make her forget. One wonders how often he does this for booty calls.
I'm always here for you, you know that.
And also what the cumulative effect this has on poor Lois going forward. Superman attends the UN General Assembly, now apparently working from Argos headquarters, and declares he will rid the world of nuclear weapons.
We can make the world safe for war profits.
Lex Luthor, meanwhile, has set up a deal with some arms merchants and sets to work on making his own rival to Superman.
Welcome home, Nuclear Man.
Nuclear Man is a muscly cosplayer in spandex who speaks with Luthor's voice but can only be controlled by Luthor when out of direct sunlight.
Destroy Superman now.
Lacey Warfield's thirst for Clark results in a double date with Lois and Superman.
How can one man be so square and so delicious?
Yes, this part of the movie turns into a Love Boat episode, and it's not a good Love Boat episode where John McClane shows up to his ex-wife's work's Christmas bash, but something with Gopher.
You'd risk worldwide nuclear war for your own personal financial gain.
Nobody wants war. I just want to keep the threat alive.
Nuclear Man and Superman face off in battle, but Superman, scratched by his foe, is near death. Is Superman dead? His cape's been found, and Clark, coincidentally, has been missing for almost exactly the same amount of time. I wonder what's going on there. Either way, he's not doing so well, and the last remaining crystal from his pod regenerates him so he can take on Nuclear Man one more time. Superman confronts what's either MacGyver leaving a bad Halloween party or Nuclear Man, I forget which. Nuclear Man has decided he wants Lacey Warfield.
Where is she?
Far away from here and safe. Don't go in there. She's not in there.
One of these days, Nuclear Man, pow, to the moon. So they fight on the moon, before Superman pushes the moon out of Earth's orbit to cause an eclipse that will turn Nuclear Man off, just like when you run over the power cord with your electric mower. This completely ignores what doing that to the moon would do to Earth's oceans, tides and weather. And then, well, let's get this straight. Superman drops Nuclear Man into a nuclear reactor, and while I'm no nuclear scientist, this doesn't sound the smartest move. Nuclear Man's energy is released and provides a colourful power surge throughout the city. And totally does not burn out everybody's clock radios, toasters, microwave ovens, TV sets or oxygen machines.
I thought I could give you all the gift of the freedom from war, but I was wrong. It's not mine to give.
This isn't a well-loved film, and ordinarily I wouldn't praise it, and I'm not really praising it. But as it's the Superman film I have watched the least over the years, it's a bit of a goofy and guilty pleasure, mainly because you aren't really expecting anything good when you're going into this. It's maybe a tiny little bit better than its reputation would suggest, only very slightly.
Hey, you never could hit a curveball.
And I say that mainly because Superman 3 had already prepared us for what a subpar Superman film would look like. Superman 4 was originally meant to have a much healthier budget that was more or less cut in half before production started. The entire film is made in the UK, with small bill rebuilt in the English countryside and locations in the modern town of Milton Keynes doubling for the skyscrapers of Metropolis and wherever the hell the UN building is. Milton Keynes is not an awful town. Like any place, there are pros and cons, good and bad, ups and downs, or swings and roundabouts. Well, more so one than the other. Exotic Milton Keynes is a place that if you ever visit from out of town, driving in a straight line will drive you nuts.
At the roundabout, take the second exit. At the roundabout, take the second exit again.
Canadian director Sidney J. Furie wasn't a no-name director, but by the 80s had worked on a lot of action films, including the Iron Eagle franchise that he also co-created. Here, he almost manages to make this work. Almost. But almost makes this work isn't the same as makes this work.
Why are there no air travel expenses here for you, Mr. Kent?
Well, I usually get airsick, sir.
The special effects were a mixed bag. Gone are the people who did such solid work on the first 3 films, and now we have a lot of blue screen, some of it okay, but also some of it very woeful. The model work is unexpectedly solid, as is the effects animation, but this film uses every trick to stretch that budget.
You're not gonna believe this.
The script is rather ordinary. Superman makes one stirring speech about disarmament and at the end of the film says, screw it, you do whatever yous want. Christopher Reeve was back for what proved to be his last turn as Superman. Here, mostly playing Clark as somebody who really wants to fend off Lacey for some reason. Reeve also received a story by credit here, which was unusual, but Reeve would later express regrets about how this film turned out. He would not be alone.
We're all very unhappy about it.
Margot Kidder is back as Lois for the 4th time, the last time. Lois and Clark are like brother and sister for most of the film. If your brother was Superman, pushes you off a balcony and wiped your mind.
Thanks.
Mariel Hemingway spends the entire film trying to interest Clark while also trying to show she's not a corporate pirate like her father.
Daddy,
Yes, darling.
stuff it.
Gene Hackman, who proved so difficult to coax back to finish Superman 2 and skipped the 3rd film entirely, must have really liked the check that Cannon waved in his face. Luthor, despite Hackman giving it at least 60% of prime Gene, has none of the verb of the first 2 films.
With my genius and enough nuclear power to mutate the genes, I can create a being who's more powerful than him.
John Cryer as Lenny Luthor is only the 2nd most shameful thing he's appeared in. Nuclear Man actor Mark Pillow doesn't even get to use his own voice when Hackman, who hitherto has failed to adequately pronounce the word nuclear in this film, overdubs Nuclear Man's voice. There's also actor Jim Broadbent and actor-director Sam Wanamaker. Mark McClure and Jackie Cooper show up briefly as Jimmy Olsen and Perry White respectively. The latter ends the film by getting a loan to buy back the Daily Planet. Superman 4 seems to have product placement by Maglite for some reason. Maybe the producers didn't want to compromise their artistic integrity by accepting money from Birdseye in return for naming the film Superman 4: The Quest for Peas. John Williams' music is again used, and here it's arranged by Alexander Courage. Yes, the man who wrote the theme to Star Trek arranges the music to Superman. This film clocks in at barely 90 minutes, which, like Luke Skywalker, is a little on the short side. There was apparently an earlier cut with a lot more to this film, including Luther's first attempt at Nuclear Man. Superman almost dying was a much bigger part of the film. For me, this has turned into a bit of a guilty pleasure. It doesn't mean I think this is at all good. It's just 80s Superman that feels a little fresher than the others that I've watched so many times over the years. I had never even bothered to try watching this film until it came included in a DVD box set of all the Superman films. So technically it's fresher for me, but it is cheap. It's not particularly deep. Half the cast seem to be sleepwalking through this, while the rest are just happy to be on a film set and not have to sweep up at the end of the day.
This time he's gone too far.
The special effects often vary between just enough to awful from one shot to the next. There seems to be all of 3 shots of Superman flying towards the camera, used over and over with a different background. And to add insult to injury, this final shot looks remarkably similar to the final shot from the first movie. By the end, you're no longer asking yourself why this movie is so short, but why you watched the whole thing. On release in 1987, the film flopped harder than a man dressed as SpongeBob SquarePants, coming second in a belly flop contest to a man dressed as Jabba the Hutt.
Ow, my pelvis!
This film did poorly at a time when Cannon's finances were in tatters.
And the name of the game is making money.
And after release, the Superman film rights would revert to the Salkinds. Superman wouldn't appear on the big screen for nearly 2 decades, and when it did, it politely ignored the existence of Supermans 3 and 4. That said, pretty much every Superman project after Superman 2 has turned out to be a bad idea, poorly executed, like the time I invested in a company that made piñatas filled with ball bearings. Superman 4: The Quest for Peace is an ignominious end for a franchise that 9 years earlier had proven superhero films, when done properly, could be profitable. Then you believed a man could fly. By the time Superman 4 limped into theaters in 1987, hardly anyone could give 2 f***s. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
Oh, sure. Here.
Go the other one!
No pain, no gain?